Welcome back to the EAHC YouTube channel. It's episode 10 of the podcast. Thank you all for a lot of uptake recently. A lot more views. Our views are up. We gained 15 subscribers last week, which I know sounds like a small margin in the grand scheme of life, but I was quite proud of the fact that we gained so many subscribers in such a short period of time last week. So this week we actually have a topic of discussion. It's myself and CJ will be joining me again. Say hello, CJ.
Hello, everybody.
And the reason CJ is on is because it was, I believe, something he wanted to talk about. And Jack is away this week, so it fitted in perfectly that we had this one on the back burner. And because Jack's away, we can now use CJ's topic of discussion and have him on to help discuss it whilst Jack's away. So we're going to be talking about Magic in the meta. And we've got a few questions regarding Magic in the meta. And then I guess what meta lists have. It's kind of a meta / magic, meta magic topic of conversation. Now, for me, I haven't attended many competitive events this year in regards to top table competitive events, but luckily CJ has. So he'll know a bit more about the wider meta, whereas my meta is a little bit more focused to our local league events, but it's still all relevant and hopefully we can give you a bit of insight. Your idea, Siege. Where do you want to start?
Hi, everybody. So, I mean, I might even just dip into over the weekend. I got put on to play against Jay Clare, and we had basically a mirror match. But he had Bilbo, I didn't. So I had Lake Town, and it was Contest of Champions. And so the rule I got caught out on was I won a heroic move off. I got Gandalf to play snooker with his backline and send a guy into his bard to knock him off his horse. That's great. But then I basically, almost like an NFL peel, where they sort of open a corridor in the middle of the lines, where I was holding back his troops and I sent my bard straight into his prone bard. Okay. And then he said, right, I'm going to Sorcerous Blast one of your troops out of combat and hit your bard. I was like, oh, I had no idea you could do that. So you can blast people out of combat. I thought once you were in combat, you were stuck that way. But that's fine, because I picked that up and I managed to use that to unseat a Boromir in a future game. So I think a lot of people are still getting used to there's a lot of new spells in this edition. Biggest change, I think, is the proliferation of ring wraiths, because in the previous edition they were airdropped into everything, and I used to as well. Nice little Shadow Lord on Fellbeast, because monsters were far more devastating because they had the ability to hurl with the accuracy of a 10-pin bowling player, and then
the spells were a lot more stronger.
Yeah, Ed Ball on one of the episodes of the Entmoot, I think it's the Desolation of Stockport episode. Here I'm plugging Harry Parkill's podcast.
Okay.
But he said, he was asked, why don't you use the Flying Circus anymore? Why don't you use multiple wraiths on Fellbeast? And he quite nicely put it as, well, monsters can't hurl in all directions anymore, so that's a bit weaker. Transfix doesn't halve fight value and attacks anymore, so that lever's gone down a bit. Most of the wraiths can't strike anymore, so that's obviously a downer. Yeah. He used to have the Undying as his general because, as the name suggests, it wouldn't die. But now that heroic tears are a thing, that means he can't take the Witch King anymore. Of course. It's a case of a lot of small nerfs to that list have made it less viable. And also there's if you're trying to resist a spell and you get a natural 6, then you get to keep that will. But probably the biggest thing for wraiths is the sap will change. Not only because it used to be D3 +1 or D6 +1. Now it is D3 will for normal and D6 for channel. But the big issue is that it's gone from a 3+ up to a 5+. So as Ed points out, if it's that difficult to cast, why don't you just use Black Dart?
I agree. I mean, I agree that all the spells that were a lot more prevalent previously and the way you sapped Will previously is very different. However, I'm still an advocate for a cheeky little ring wraith, and I believe that you can take a ring wraith at any points because you can make a really cheap one and have it as a bit more of a support character, or something that I've liked to do myself is use the Mouth of Sauron, because when he runs out of his 4 will points, he's still 3 attack on the charge, strength 4 with a 2-handed sword, fight 5 Numenorian. And the sap will thing, I completely agree that you might as well go for other spells, or you go for the easier spells that they might use 1 will or 2 will to resist. Like Drain Courage is a really good one for that, especially with the Numenorian front line with Moranon's supports. That's something that I'm looking at using a bit more prevalently, because they need their will, or they need their courage rather, to actually charge your warriors as well as potentially your heroes if you've got a ring wraith or the Mouth of Sauron, because they all cause terror. So I think the magic itself is very different, but I think if you are prepared to sort of, I mean, last event I completely threw by testing stuff, and it was, it kind of worked, it kind of didn't work. I had some positives with the Shadow Lord was still good. Did I notice I'd spent a bit? I spent 4 will on his Pale of Darkness or Pool of Darkness. I forget the actual name of it, but that 4 will saved me from, I think it was maybe 20 odd bows. I think I lost 3 models to shooting in 4 rounds of shooting, whereas not having him there, I'd have probably lost a lot more models to shooting. So I think it's still, I think my opinion on magic in the meta, somewhat limited because I haven't been to any massively competitive events this year, is that it's still very useful, but it's more of a support. There's no, I think someone's asked this question later, but there's no sort of instant win with magic anymore. As you say, in the previous edition of the game, you'd have any ring wraith on a fell beast was really good, even the ones that cast spells on +1 higher because they're not from Mordor specifically. But even then, they were still very good in combat, so it kind of made up for it. But I think they're still very good. They just have to be used a little bit differently.
I agree. Magic's probably a little less aggressive, with maybe the exception of Wrath of Brunin and Nature's Wrath, which themselves just got walloped a bit. But what the huge meta component was Sorcerer's Blast, because that ability to just line up a shield wall and just, I'm casting on you get Saruman the Wise sprinkled into just about any good army, and he's casting Sorcerer's Blast on a 4 with a re-roll to cast. It was just awful. But now it's a little simpler. It's you get one model who goes back into one other model. So now you've got to be more strategic about it. So maybe you can knock over a banner bearer so that he can't influence the fight. Maybe you want to send somebody into a mounted hero, as I was describing earlier, and just knock him off his horse. It's no longer the kind of huge damage output that it used to be, which is probably as well, given that Saruman now in an Isengard list still keeps his 4+ Sorcerer's Blast. That's a separate topic in itself, in that people were pointing out in the previous edition, why is Saruman a worse spellcaster once he becomes evil? And so they fixed that. So he's quite tasty now.
Yeah, I think he's very good in that list for his tier. Certainly at a higher points level. Currently, we don't have many Uruk-hai or Isengard heroes. Other than I think it's Lurtz who's Valor as well, I believe.
Yeah, so Saruman's Legend, Lurtz's Valor, and then the rest of them, as far as I can remember, are Fortitude.
Yeah,
so the Shaman.
Of course, yeah, which is nice because Uruk-hai, although they're not the most expensive troops in the game, it's nice that if you invest those points in Saruman and probably Grima, because I don't know why you wouldn't take one without the other, but it's nice that they have that hero of legend in there. So other magic, what do you think, being a bit more of a tournament goer this year than me, what sort of magic in the current meta is almost an auto include? What would you consider to be auto includes in the current meta?
So if you'd have asked,
I guess we'll do good and evil because obviously there's
Mhm.
some casters that don't apply to both. So
Sure. Well, first example for evil is Fury, which used to be really, really nice and very frustrating to play against. So I used to like doing a Goblin mix grill where I would have the Moria with the Goblin Town with the Goblin Mercenaries. And that was fine because Fury affected all of them.
yeah.
So they're all auto passing. They all get a 6+ save to wounds.
Mhm.
Or if you channel it, which you almost always do because you've only got a 1 in 12 chance of failing it on 2 dice, you do the channeled version and it's a 5+ save, which is
Yep.
enormously frustrating to play against because the point of goblins is, well, they're cheap and they die quite often.
It
But
was
then,
also really good for the Goblin King.
yeah, exactly, because then the Goblin King's got a 3+ blubber save, he's got a 5+ fury save, and then he's got a fate point.
Yeah.
So unless you had Orcrist or Sting or Glamdring, basically I was, not taking wounds for anything. And that meant the safest place for the shaman, who had a spear and was able to support models with larger bases in the previous edition. You'd stick the shaman behind the Goblin King, and it goes around as a nice 4 attack, fight 6 monster
With Burley and a
with
two-handed
Burley.
weapon.
Yep.
Yeah, it's horrible. I also used to champion that list quite a lot. The Goblin mix match, but not anymore, obviously. So
No,
Fury was obviously a lot better, but you still believe that it's very much part of the meta currently.
I think it's essential if you've got Courage 2 is so unreliable. If you're trying to charge terrifying enemies and then you've got heroes like Galadriel, Lady of Light, has a -1 Harbinger effect, and
Right.
now so does the King of the Dead. So
Yeah.
if you're playing goblins against the Army of the Dead, you are effectively Courage 1. Everything's dying on 3s.
Yeah.
It's kind of hopeless. So you absolutely do need a Fury to be able to charge reliably, and it's more important now because of another point I was going to move on to, which is good side Aura of Dismay.
Yeah.
Which so Radagast has it, Kurdan has it, and Thranduil with his crown has it. I'm sure there are others I'm missing, but up until very recently, when the FAQ made Radagast's Nature's Wrath less overpowered, you were seeing quite a lot in the meta of a Kurdan and Radagast combo, and I'm guilty of having tried that out as well because
Yeah.
it's a potent combination. You've now got a terrifying front line on a 5+, and because Kurdan's got free will every turn, you can just throw a dice at it every turn until you get it before the lines clash. Or if you're desperate to get it up turn 1 for Contest of Champions or something, you just, right, well, I've got 4 will in the store. Here's 3 dice. I've probably got about a 70% chance of getting a 5+ on one of them. So Kurdan probably still is sprinkled around because in this new edition, he's now got Blinding Light, Aura of Dismay, Aura of Command, which is useful if you tie that in with, for example, Lake Town Guard, who are Courage 2. I played against that last December in the league finale. James,
Tried that against me.
I use Survivors of Lake Town. They're a
Yeah.
bit,
Okay.
tiny bit different, but yeah, same idea.
It's
Uh,
horrid.
and his fourth spell is Enchanted Blades, which is great fun, especially if you get Contest of Champions where you've got Radagast as your leader, because then you're like, right, I'm going to roll for my enchanted hedgehog to beat you to death. So
Yeah, no, Kurdan's profile from old edition to new is it's amazing. For his points, he's amazing, in my
yeah,
opinion.
he's gone from never used to, oh god, he's everywhere. So yeah,
Yeah, it's a little bit good. Um, so you would say Aura of Dismay is another spell that's
mm.
very much prevalent in the meta.
Well, Callum Edens just came second at Ardacon using a kind of Battle of Five Armies themed list where he's got Thranduil on Moose with Spooky Crown, Thorin on Goat with 3 heroic combats and a load of Iron Hills Dwarves, and then a Lake Town Militia Captain with 5 might because Alfred's there, and
Nice.
so he's got numbers. He's got high defense guys to go in the front as they march up so that he doesn't get shot to death.
Hmm.
But chiefly, he's got these expensive models which now all cause terror. Somebody did quite an interesting study on what models were sort of best for their points value.
Okay.
There's a spreadsheet, it's somewhere on the GBHL, and it basically came out as the sort of best value troops in the game
Right.
were high elves that were under the influence of Aura of Dismay and Riders of the Dead. Uh,
Interesting.
Possibly because they're terrifying as well, but also they get the knockdown, they get all the cavalry bonuses, and they're wounding on courage. So maybe,
And their
but
horse is defense 6.
yep.
That's
So
very interesting.
yeah, elves used to be a little bit easy to roll over, but now you've got Kurdan providing this amazing magic support, and all
Mm.
of the Lords of the West are really difficult to deal with for different reasons. So
Yeah.
elves have really
But
benefited from new meta magic.
which, to be fair, they should be good, wouldn't they? They like elves. They should be good.
Yeah.
As in they should be competitive. Sorry, not they are a good faction, but they should
Hmm.
be a competitive army. Is what I should have said.
Yeah. They still struggle to
Um,
wound stuff sometimes, but every elf has got an elven blade to win the fight rolls with, and then they can go two-handed and they can feint because the spear support is also fight 5. So
mm.
once you start racking up those, they actually do get a little bit killy.
It's also the Kingsguard. If you take Gil-galad, that can
Mm.
fight 6 elves potentially as well.
I mean, Gil-galad thankfully can still, linking it back to magic, be shut down with transfixes because he's got 3 will points, and that's your lot. But let's face it, if he had Fortify Spirit as well as Glorfindel, then there'd just be no stopping him.
Yeah, no, Glorfy is very, very good, but he doesn't have the Aegis spear, Aegis. I
I
don't know how
don't
it's
know how you
pronounced.
pronounce it either.
But the spear is a lance, but it's nasty.
Well,
So
shout out to Tom there because Tom Meinard loves to play high elves, and he often has this debate as to whether to go Gil-galad for the killy power or Glorfindel. And I point out to him, if you've got Glorfindel and you've got Círdan casting enchanted blades on him every turn,
it's just as
he's
good,
he's killy enough, you know.
and it's cheaper.
And he's cheaper, and he can't be monstered to death, and he's
Mm.
resistant to magic with Fortify Spirit. So,
Yeah, I had the same discussion with Kieran Hatton at the
uh-huh.
the event he won in Harlow recently, where
Hmm.
he had Gil-galad and Elendil. And I suggested that he swaps Gil-galad out for because he in the final game he came up against 3 ring wraiths,
Hmm.
and he lost all of his heroes very quickly. It's only
Ouch.
because he had Kingsguard who were fight 6, and the strength 4 Numenorians, and he was able to sort of make little mini captain tag teams of fight 6 strength 4,
Hmm.
and he actually turned the game around. But I said to him, if you had Glorfy, you might not have lost Gil-galad and Elendil so quickly because obviously he has the 2 dice to resist plus his will. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. Anyway, we're all over the place, a little bit off topic. So far we've got Fury
Hmm.
and Aura of Dismay.
Yep. I'm looking in the book. Another one that's changed a little bit is Call Winds because you used to see Stormcallers dropped into a lot of good lists.
It.
And on a 2 plus, they could just, I'm going to fart your guy 2d6 in that direction, say goodbye. But now you have to do channeled for 2d6, and on normal it's 1d6. I
Mm-hmm.
might be wrong that that's changed. On a 2 plus, that was just a bit too reliable. Although, saying that, now that it's a 3 plus, I haven't actually seen anyone use a Stormcaller since the new edition.
No, neither have I, to be honest. Not been to many events, but obviously our local events we have a few elf players: Jack, Tom, Ben,
Hmm.
and I don't think any of them have used a Stormcaller. So
Banishment here is also one that's it's not introduced because Galadriel, Lady of Light, used to have it, but if I remember rightly, Ed says that it's now tripled. There are 3 profiles with it. The only one I can remember off the top of my head is Gandalf the White, but
yeah,
that's very, if you pack in a ring wraith, then you're in trouble because it's an automatic wound to a wraith which is otherwise, pretty durable. So I had a game recently where I was playing my Harad list
hmm
against Gondor, And I got to the end of the game and I said to him, "Why didn't you try and banish my betrayer?" He said, "Oh, can I do that?" Yeah, Gandalf the White's got it. I was thinking the whole game, gee, I'm thankful you're not banishing my Wraith, because that's pretty strong. They're only 1 wound and only 2 fate, so if you don't resist it, you can be in big trouble pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's another thing. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on, that certain profiles have had an additional spell or slight tweaks to the wording of some spells that does make them a little bit better, in my opinion. But if you're not overly familiar with every single profile that they currently have available, then it is something that you might just miss, like we're going to discuss with which spell was it?
Collapse rocks.
That's the one, collapse rocks. We're going to discuss that later. But yeah, as I say, like until I saw the question, and me and you discussed it earlier just briefly, I didn't even know it was a thing because I'm not overly familiar with Gandalf's profile. So it's an easy mistake to miss one little addition to a profile, such as an extra spell or a slight changing of the wording of a spell. So we'll get back on track a little bit. So would you say that there are any other spells that are auto includes in the current meta, other than Fury and Aura of Dismay?
I mean, the ability to transfix is still really good, because if nothing else, you're still limiting the damage output of a hero.
So from my experience of the meta at a local level, because I haven't been to the only GBHO event I've been to this year, I didn't take any casters, so I can't really comment on the mega uber competitive tournament scene. But from a local standpoint, having 2 transfixes in my list is something that I've been trying to go for, with the mouth and a wraith, or well, yes, generally a mouth and the wraith, because they're the only ones. It's the only army I've really used is Mordor. But it not only gives your opponent something to think about in regards to positioning of their heroes, it also means that you are, if they're resisting 1 and they might roll a 6, but then you go for it again, and you are eventually going to get their will down to the point where they can't resist you anymore. So it's a lot easier to do the spells you might want to do, such as a Black Dart, or I don't know, a channel transfix, because you've now got their will down. So yeah, transfix again, I think is still very good. It's not as good unless you channel it, of course. But with most wraiths and the mouth all being 2 might, other than the Witch King, obviously, is something that you'd only want to do when you've got all the will gone, so that you can guarantee the actual effect of the channeling.
And then I bring in Gandalf with his strength and will and his protection of the valor, which is a nice new spell, which I use quite a bit over the weekend. This power targets the caster or a single friendly model within 3. This target may not be targeted by an enemy's magical powers or special rules for this turn.
Oh wow, that's really good.
If you channel it, it affects all friendly models within 3. But where I was using that at the weekend was, for example, oh, I forgot to use Alfred's special rule this turn, and he's got Legolas on his side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast Protection of the Valor onto Alfred. He now can't be targeted by Legolas's super archer thingy, whatever it's called. And that's really nice, especially if you've got Bard on the front line and you're relying on him to have a relatively high damage output. Or maybe you want to protect one of the girls because there's Sam Huddy and his nasty black darting habits. So, yeah, that's great. Strength and Will's also quite a nice one, because Gandalf, once you've cast Terrifying Aura, and then if your opponent doesn't have a ranged threat, you don't need to be casting Blinding Light. So then you've probably got a turn or 2 before the lines clash. And so you might as well just have Gandalf go, on a free dice, I'm going to try and strengthen Bard's Will. And then by the time the lines clash, suddenly you've got a 5 Will Bard. So good luck transfixing that, because he's also got 6 might thanks to Alfred. And that came in really nice when I played Angmar on the 4th game. Because suddenly he's got the tainted 2 Barrow Whites, and they're all trying to cut Bard down to size.
With Paralyze.
Yeah. So then I can just go, Protection of the Valor, you can't touch him this turn. Here comes the heroic combat.
would you say that if you have a list that a Gandalf is available, that
Hmm.
that spell is an auto include in either a minister? Does Gandalf the White have it as well, or is it just Gandalf the Grey?
Gandalf the White does not have Protection of the Valor.
Okay,
He does have Strength and Will on a 3+, though, so that's better than Gandalf the Grey.
right.
And to be honest, you can use Gandalf a bit more offensively against ring wraiths because you can just cast banishment instead of protecting your guy.
And Gandalf the White has 2 attacks.
Yep.
So would you say from his pool of spells, are any of those an auto include if you can include them?
For the grey or the white,
For both, we're just discussing magic
uh,
meta.
the ability to, because most things are going to have at least one killy threat, the
Yeah.
ability to transfix those is really important. So I think it's worth having that spell if you have easy access to it.
So transfix and or immobilize.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So we've got transfix and or immobilize, fury,
Hmm.
aura of dismay, and I guess we'll talk about Nature's Wrath and Wrath of Brunei next because they were extremely dominant before. Having been to Ardacon this weekend, were
Hmm.
there a lot of lists with those spells in the lists?
Didn't play a single one.
Oh,
And I know that one of our teammates, Tanya, was going to have Arwen in her Rivendell list, and then the FAQ came out and she said, well, never mind that. I'll have Eristor instead.
interesting. Okay, interesting change. So you feel like that FAQ has, because me and Jack discussed this on the FAQ video,
Hmm.
and then a few people actually commented saying having that 3-inch area effect actually makes the spell better because it's harder to resist. So do you
Yeah.
feel that the FAQ hurt the spell, or do you feel that FAQ made the spell slightly less effective in terms of range, but more effective because it's harder to resist? What's your opinion on the nerf to those two spells that are very similar but slightly different?
Okay, so I did play Kieran at an 80-point event a couple of weeks back, and
Okay.
he had Elrond and Arwen in his Rivendell list, and the TO said we're not going to enforce the FAQ because it came out 2 days before the tournament. And Kieran, to his credit, actually put a post up saying, "Look, guys, there's no point in me spamming a spell that I'm not going to be able to use it like that ever again. I want to play fair and use the new, smaller range," which we all thought was a really sporting move on his part. And
So
so,
So just props to the TO for not suggesting that he changed his whole army list 2 days before, but then
mhm,
obviously well done to Kieran, as you say, for playing it in the way that he was going to have to going forward after that event anyway.
mhm.
So that
so that
carry on, sorry.
Yeah, so then I ran into him on the final game, and I had Harad, who obviously defense 4, so Wrath of Brunin's like, oh no, this
Yeah,
is
that
going to hurt.
could be quite grim potentially.
Yeah, so it was exactly as you describe. I had, I can't remember what on earth, it was Domination, that was it. And so we'd deployed pretty much in each other's faces immediately,
Right.
and I didn't want Suladan to be in the firing line because he's only 5, and these elves will win on a 3+ because of Elven Blades.
Yeah.
So I had him kind of stand behind the lines and be a 6-inch banner. And then I had the Betrayer, who, for no reason whatsoever, would you want on the front line fighting. So suddenly that meant I've got a 2-inch deep. It's not a shield wall because none of the Harad have shields, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
And so that meant that Elrond, who was also he kept him one row back for the first turn,
Okay.
so that even if I charged in, he suddenly got a 3-inch sweep with Nature's Wrath, and he was doing the same with Arwen. So
Okay.
yes, absolutely, it makes it harder to resist, and it's still knocking down, a sizable area. It's a 6-inch diameter circle, so you
Especially
still.
with two of them.
Mm. So he got one off with Arwen, and I deliberately kept my wargs 10 inches back, so that they wouldn't be affected. And then I engineered a situation where I attacked the elf on the end of his line with Gurits and 3 Warg Riders, heroic combated around the back and killed Arwen before she could do any more damage.
Nice.
But yeah, it's that if it wasn't so difficult to deal with, then I probably wouldn't have bothered with that maneuver, because there's no way of resisting it otherwise.
Yeah.
Because Gurits has got 1 will point on him, so.
So sorry, yeah. So from that example, would you say that it's from the FAQ? Would you say that the spell is better now, or worse, or is it just a bit more situational? Like we've seen other spells that have been slightly edited from the previous edition to the current edition. Have they just brought it in line with what Magic should be, or do you think it's been too far and it's now not really viable?
Well, the lack of Radagast at Ardagon was quite surprising. I even looked over at Ed Ball's Rivendell Knight list. So up until now, he's been doing Arwen, Radagast, and Elrond, and it means that if you win the combat, you can stand up, and that's it. But it also meant Radagast could hover around the back and just sort of, you take the charge, and then Radagast just walks up and goes, Nature's Wrath, everything falls down. You can't do that now because the range of Radagast isn't large enough. So maybe we'll see less of him around.
That's interesting though, because he still offers a lot. I assume he has immobilize because he should.
Yeah.
He still has.
He's got loads of stuff. Panic Steed is,
That's it.
I think, what you're after.
Yeah, Panic Steed. I couldn't think of it. He still has Panic Steed. He still has Aura of Dismay.
Yep.
So it's very interesting that a player of Ed's caliber would drop. I mean, maybe it was 750 points, right?
Yeah, he's now trying out Saruman in that list instead as part of the White Council alliance.
Okay, it's an interesting change. But I just think it's very interesting that the slight changes to one spell has meant that he's dropped something that he's been trying all year to try something else at arguably one of the biggest events of the year. It's very interesting. Because I initially said to Jack, I don't think it is as good. But after, the example you just gave, where you had to set up differently, deploy differently, potentially, and really consider how you were going to deal with a 3-inch bubble as opposed to a 6-inch bubble, I actually think it's probably as good and maybe even slightly better, albeit it's a little bit more situational now, and you have to be a little bit more careful with the positioning of not only your heroes that can cast that spell, but also, where that 3 inches gets in terms of where their heroes are. I actually think it's possibly as good, if not slightly better.
Yeah, I mean, possibly the biggest difference is now you can't use the 3 of them together to make your entire army lie down every turn.
I agree. You can't necessarily do that where you'd have literally a 6, 12, 24, like 36-inch line of, haha, you're all on the ground. But you could certainly have a concentrated area where you position your troops and then you make a really big hole in someone's army very quickly, potentially.
Well, the FAQ, the blog on the community that came with it said they want to sort of encourage the spellcasters to be nearer the front line. So I actually thought at the time, I wonder if we're going to see the bunny sled make more of an appearance, because if you're forcing Radagast to go to the front line in order to make the spell effective, then give him 6 attacks on the charge, whatever it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you should always put Radagast on some sort of mount. I think he's just much better. So I believe if he's still the points he was in the previous edition, you're either paying 10 points for a horse or 40 extra points for the sleigh. I think he's really good on the sleigh. And as me and Jack discussed in one of the previous podcasts, I believe it was Prepare for Battle, maybe 4 or 5. Having him 4 attacks because of the sleigh, 5 attacks on the charge, 6 attacks because of Sebastian is incredibly good at fight. He's a really good, reliable troop killer, in my opinion. Albeit it's a little bit harder to maneuver the sleigh around how you might want to, whereas having him on horse gives you a little bit more freedom in terms of how you can maneuver. But I think, for 40 extra points, compared to the horse. I think the sleigh is incredibly good.
The only worry with the sleigh for me is that it takes one hurl or sorceress blast, and that's 40 points wiped out.
I agree, but if you have him on a horse anyway, so obviously it's a game where you don't want that to happen. Your opponent might want that to happen, but if you've had a decent charge and you've killed 4 or 5 models, and then you've heroic combated and potentially killed 4 or 5 more. Not saying you would do that every turn, but potentially, you probably on a minimum of a heroic combat. I think you probably quite comfortably kill 6 models, provided your dice are somewhat average. 6 attacks doubled. I think you can easily kill 3 models one combat, 3 models the next combat. If you then lost your sleigh, it's annoying, but you've already made those 50 points back. But yeah, so I just think that's very interesting that a player of Ed's ability and quality would change his list for the biggest event of the year just because of the FAQ. It's very interesting.
To be fair, it basically walloped his entire strategy. So yeah,
I don't disagree with you. I just think it's obviously it's good that we're having the FAQs twice a year because it keeps the game fresh and it keeps the meta fresh, which is always nice. But I think the timing of the FAQ when there's a big event not too far away is perhaps something that should be looked at in terms of the release date for the FAQ, or release the FAQ and say it's effective from such and such a time, rather than here's an FAQ, here's the biggest event of the year, here's that list you've been using all year, now you've got to change it up. I think that's a little bit...
Yeah, I felt a bit sympathetic for Ed on that front, especially as he was playing in the International Masters tournament. And so the list he's been using for the last year suddenly changed dramatically. But interestingly enough, the FAQ also hit Red Alliances, which is what won the event in the end.
What? Okay, so what? We're discussing Magic, but we'll go off on the tangent. So it was an impossible ally that won Ardicon.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, Goblin King, Grinner, Golem, lots of goblins, Goblin Mercenary Warband, a Shade with an Orc banner, and the Spider Queen.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. Even though...
see why that's very good. That's disgusting.
And that came first, yeah. Because the changes were sort of to do with when you're considered broken or whatever, but all it meant was basically the Angmar Warband was the Shade, and as far as I can remember, 1 banner, so you can't break it. And the same with the Dark Denizens list. The Spider Queen is on its own, so you got to kill it to break it.
I mean, it's only 3 models though.
Yeah, it was the Goblin Town hoarding out, and they were reading out the lists before the final, and he was just reading Goblin King, 18 goblins with picks. Grinner, 12 goblins with picks. Golem. Yeah, it's a horrible soup combination. But
Golem's great in that list now with the changes in the FAQ.
Absolutely, because we're straying even further, but the reason I lost to J. Claire at the weekend, probably not the only reason, is Bilbo, who I completely underrated as a... Because I thought if you're running a Lake Town list and you've got the option to spend 90 points, I'd rather have Legolas as a green ally. But now he can move through everything. That ability to just Bard will charge in with fight 6. Yeah. Bilbo will sneak around the back, and now whatever it's fighting is a maximum of fight 5. Yeah, it's going down.
Oh yeah, it's a combination that I think I've discussed in our group chat with the Goblin Town list with the King, and then having Golem do the exact same trick, because then again the King is fight 6, and then Golem goes in and whatever he's fighting is maximum fight 5.
But Bilbo has 3 might, 3 will, resistant to magic, 3 fate, can lead 12 Lake Town militia. He's got strike. He's got an elvish blade. So
of the 2, Bilbo's definitely better. Yeah. It's not that I was just discussing the actual ring rules itself.
Yeah, I was comparing him to Gollum. Final point: he never rolls a 1 or a 2 for the ring. He's he never has to roll for who's got control of him.
Oh, because he's got his rules are slightly different, aren't they?
Yeah, it has not awoken or something of that nature.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try Bilbo in the
Oh.
future. We'll see what happens.
So Magic in the meta. Is there anything else any other points you wanted to discuss regarding it, or do you think from the conversation so far, I think Magic is still is extremely useful, and it definitely has a place within the meta, but
Yep.
with the recent FAQ and the changes to the spells from one edition to the next, it's perhaps not as I don't want to say game breaking, but it's perhaps not as game changing from game to game as it was in the previous edition, but it still is extremely useful in the right circumstance with the right spellcasters. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, requires a bit more finesse,
Yeah.
probably, to use now. Flicking through just to see anything else. Drain Courage we touched on, especially if you're in an Angmar list. It's just, I'm not going to bother resisting Drain Courage, but then it builds up very quickly. Enraged Beast, I think, is a little bit different now because I think it used to be fight, strength, attack, and courage were all bumped up by 3. That's now the channeled version. They all go up by 2. As a Moria player, I used to think Drazag is 90 points for 5 shots at a 3+ spell, and then you've got a big issue with Moria is the inability to pull things out of line. So you don't have Compel, you don't have a Fell Light is in them, so you need to engineer a situation where you can isolate an opponent's model, and then you need to win the heroic move off. So I thought Enraged Beast probably not very useful, but then James Wilson lent me the models for a EAHC tournament, and now it's just I've got a fight 6 spider with 4 attacks. It's coming for you.
And it rerolls wounds, right?
Rerolls 1s unless you've got Ashrak and you upgrade them to Venom back spiders.
Right.
Flame Burst, now that they re-released Kardush, is a pain.
I was looking at Kardush because I got him in the May to order the previous one, and for the GBHL events prior to my suddenly buying and painting up a Corsair army, which obviously got leaked last week or the week before, leaked by me. But yeah, I was looking at Kardush, and I just think he's really good.
He is. I mean, you consider Saruman takes a 5+ to cast Flame Burst. The fact that Kardush, this minor orc shaman, can go, right, I'm going to get more will out of this orc, and now I'm going to 2 dice fireball you. And it's especially because Kardush works as well if you've got a Wraith in the list. We're back to double casting. So you can go, right, there's Bard on his pretty horse. He's charged in. I'm going to Flame Burst the horse and force Bard to spend will resisting it. If he doesn't, great, dead horse, probably. If he does, then he's spent will, and now the Ring Wraith can go transfix, and he's not doing anything. And then when the Ring Wraith runs out of will at the end of the game, Kardush can just go, right, here, have D6 will back.
Yeah, and sacrifice himself.
Yeah, he's such a good profile for 60 points.
And a Hero of Fortitude.
And a Hero of Fortitude.
Which is massive for a shaman.
And the ability, because now you can't leave a banner on its own. You've got to surround it with other stuff, because otherwise Kardush is going to 3+ fireball your banner, and there it goes. Next one I was going to touch on was Fortify Spirit, which is so I saw a list run by Jacob Krokmal. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's from Poland, and he had Boromir and a few other hitters from the Fellowship, and then Galadriel, Lady of Light, as well for Blinding Light. And her ability to just go, here's Fortify Spirit on Boromir. So suddenly 1 will Boromir is pretty much impervious to magic, and he's going around hacking everything to death.
I actually just received a in blister mounted Fellowship Boromir. I got it for a really good price. It wasn't something that I was A, looking at buying, or B, have any intention of using in the near future. But for the price I paid, which is probably the price it was when it came out, it's such a nice model, and to have the old blister, it was worth it for me. So
Well, there you go. Team him up with Galadriel and just have him munch
Got
through everything.
I've got a Galadriel. I might have to look at that. Yeah, it's still fit. I've used it a couple of times with the Ring Wraith, and I believe the Mouth has it as well.
Yeah, it's nice that you've now sort of got a spell to represent the Shrieking Wraiths, which used to be in the old Blue Journey books, where there was a rule about this turn all your enemies' courage drops by 2 because the Ring Wraiths are doing their shrieky thing.
Yeah,
But you watch it in the film and they do it, and the soldiers clasp their hands over their head and they run away in fear. And I think this is quite a nice little spell that they've written in, and it can be extremely situationally good. I've had it used against me by a betrayer on Fell Beast,
right.
and because within 12 of the Fell Beast, everything drops their courage. So my courage to Lake Town were being forced to run in a certain direction, which then opened up a flight path for Bard and his girls for the Fell Beast. So
Nice.
you can use it really sneakily. It's not one you see very often, but when it does happen, it can be really devastating.
Yeah, definitely.
What
So
else?
one that I didn't know about, which will take us on to Sam Huddy's question, was my opinion on, is it Break Rocks? You said it was called
Collapse Rocks.
Collapse Rocks. So me and CJ, I wasn't aware of the spell. Not familiar with Gandalf, and I've not read every spell in the rule book, because not that it would take me an excessively long time. It's just if I look at the spells I have and I'm not sure exactly what they do, I'll look at that specific spell. I haven't sat and read every single one. But we were discussing it, and I agree with. If you want to share your opinion, Siege, and then I'll share my opinion afterwards.
So, just for the listeners who may not have run into it, because I think it's unique to Gandalf the Grey, and the situational nature of it means you might not even know it existed. So, this power targets one enemy model within range. This power may only be cast on a model that is within a ruin, stone or brick building, cave, rock pile, or similar terrain piece. The target suffers 1 strength 5 hit, and if you channel it, all models, friend and foe, within 2 inches of the target also suffer a strength 5 hit. The problem is it casts on a 5+, and so does Sorcerer's Blast, which also does a 5+ hit, and it allows you to knock over something else behind it. So basically what I was suggesting to Josh earlier is the only time you would use it is if you wanted to do a wound on something but not move it away from Gandalf, maybe towards an objective in domination or something. Apart from that, you might be in a situation where you've managed to coerce your opponent's army into walking through a ruin, and then you just go, I'm going to do heroic channeling, and they go, oh, I wonder if he's going to transfix my hero. Nope, I'm going to collapse this nice terrain piece on all of your models.
Yeah, so essentially what we discussed was if your opponent puts themselves... Sam's original question was, he wants to know my opinion of it. My opinion of it is it's very good for certain situations, either the ones that CJ described, basically. And he asked, when would I use it over Sorcerer's Blast? And exactly what CJ said. So if you wanted to wound a specific model but not make it move away, so it could be in a combat already, and then you don't want to, you might want to, I don't know, say it's Lords of Battle, for instance, and you've got your hero in there and you want to get the might point back, but you want to guarantee the wound, the kill, sorry. You'd hit it with the big rock, and then it's easier for your hero to then kill the other hero potentially. Or the scenario where you've managed to get your opponent into a choke point and they might not be familiar with the spell, because I wasn't, hold my hands up, had no idea what it was, and then you go, so from him, it's a strength 6 2-inch bubble, did you say? If you channel it, so you've potentially
strength 5, but yeah.
Oh, strength 5. So if it's most things, you're probably wounding it on most heavy armored things, you're probably wounding them on 5s. And if it's less than that, potentially 4s or 3s, depending on what it is. So I think it's very situational again, like most spells that we've discussed today, but I think it's very good. So that's Sam's question. We're not on the Q&A section yet, but that was just something that while we were discussing new spells to the game that CJ's going through the list, that's just one that I remembered while we remembered.
The only other thing I might point out is Shatter from a Black Shield Shaman.
Okay, has that changed or?
It's not changed as such. If you channel it, your opponent takes a Strength 6 hit, which is, I'm probably never going to use that.
Right.
But the ability for a Goblin army to shatter the enemy's banner is huge, because if you're rolling 2 dice with a lower fight value against 2 dice with a banner reroll, you are probably going to lose about 70% of those fights. But suddenly you shatter the banner, and suddenly the odds even out a little bit. And then maybe you've got a drum as well. So suddenly you're rolling more dice than your opponent.
Yeah, I think the Goblin Drum is really good. It's expensive, but it's potentially really good. I think we've covered the topic that we were discussing some depth. If we missed anything, guys, or there's anything specifically that you wanted us to discuss regarding Magic in the meta, leave it in the comments or put it on the next Facebook post, and we can come back to it. It's just to cover the whole of the. We could potentially be talking about Magic for hours, and it'd probably get a little bit boring. So we'll go to the Q&A / comment section from the previous video and from Facebook, because people have left comments, and although I said we're not going to do the Facebook posts, I think some people just don't comment, which is fine. It's absolutely fine. But so we've got a mixture of both. I've got them both up. The first comment is one of my own, because I wasn't here last week and I did actually comment on the video, so I'm not going to read my own comment because that's completely pointless. But Tom Ramsden has asked, question for the next episode: how would you go about defeating a Return of the King Legion with a low courage evil army such as Mordor without necessarily having something built into your list to counter it, like a Shaman or a Warhorn, for example? And then, other than playing, let's do it or break it down. So that's the first part. Without having something built into your list, like a Shaman or a Warhorn, for example. Well, you're probably going to have more models, so you should get +1 courage anyway, unless you're using one of the Mordor legions. But even then, you're going to go from courage 2 to courage 3 back to courage 2. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very, without having a Shaman or a Warhorn. Well, I guess it depends what points you're playing at and what else you have in your list. So when people leave these questions, I'd sometimes like to know what points level they're thinking of, so that we can actually give examples. But if you can afford it, maybe something to kill the King of the Dead. Not that it's easy to do, but
no. A Black Numenorian frontline probably helps, because they're courage 4 base, and that's about as good as it gets with Mordor.
So I actually played against Dan's Return of the King with Black Numenorian front line. So I had 12 Black Numenorians in my list. And yes, I had more models. So I went to Courage 5 and then back to Courage 4.
But the army bonus. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so, you have the army bonus without a Warhorn. Potentially you have Courage 6 Black Numenorians with both options. But obviously that is a little bit pricey then. Because the Warhorn is 30 points and a Black Numenorian is already 9 points. So you're looking at a 39-point model, which for just a troop is a little bit expensive. But he has asked specifically not to have... So I would go with Black Numenorians or potentially Morgul Knights. Are they Courage 4 base?
Yeah, and the other thing I might suggest is whether or not to use Morannons over normal. Because they're going to die on the same dice roll, so you might as well just hoard out. Yeah,
because you get the reroll of 1s to wound as well while you have more models on the table, and you can still take Mordor orcs with picks, so you can still get to strength 4.
Yeah.
So if you weren't to add a Shaman or a Warhorn specifically, I believe even Mordor Uruk-hai courage 3, I believe. I could be wrong on that though. So potentially picking some of the models that are slightly higher courage initially, and then hoarding out your spear supports with cheaper orcs, so that you keep your numbers up because you bought a slightly more expensive front line.
Yeah, and they're also, whether you've got Numenorians or Mordor Uruk-hai, they're fight 4, so you'll be out fighting the army of the dead, which means they get less chances to kill you, which is,
See, where I went wrong is I had a warband of Blackguard because I was testing things, and at 12 points a model, I had 5 of them. I lost 4 in one turn, which was painful and expensive in terms of points and buying the models, but that's redundant. So yeah, Black Numenorians, Morgul Knights, cheap Orc Spear supports. If you can take a Shaman, I don't know why you wouldn't, but probably Kardush because he's better.
Yeah.
Because then he could bring a warband of Black Numenorians with spear supports. So it doesn't make sense not to take a Shaman if you're playing a King of a Return of the King Legion. You need a Shaman. It's a must.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just not going to get to charge. You will with the Black Numenorians, to be fair, because I didn't fail too many. But if you don't want to include a Shaman or a Warhorn, Black Numenorians, Morgul Knights, maybe Uruk-hai. Or maybe look at, I guess, your ring wraiths on fell beasts potentially.
Well, I was just looking up Return of the King in my book here to see, because a big part of that army is the Aragorn banner and the King of the Dead Harbinger of Evil.
Yeah.
And I actually thought, well, if you've got something that can transfix them and turn those abilities off, that might be a big plus.
I believe Harbinger is passive, and I believe the banner is also, but I could be wrong on both counts. Yeah, so that's the first part. We've given you some examples of things you could try. Wraiths on fell beasts, potentially, because the Witch King can deal with Aragorn, and a normal Wraith on a fell beast can deal with the King of the Dead, in my opinion. It'd be a difficult fight, but if you can transfix him so he can't strike, then it's down to a dice roll off essentially. But you have more might, so.
How about a Mumak? Tusk weapons,
Mumak.
fearless. You just win the heroic move off, and you just go ploughing through everything.
He has asked for a Mordor list and Haradar, a green ally. So yeah, you could do that. That would work. So then second part to his question, other than playing the scenario, is it best to focus on killing Aragorn to prevent the endless might / priority / the banner, or B, focus on the King of the Dead to get rid of Harbinger, instant kill orcs, or C, avoid those two and try and kill Esmeri? See, trying to kill the warriors does kind of work to an extent, but they're very hard to kill, especially with shields.
Yeah.
Especially if you're only using the models we said above, because they're strength 3. Yeah, the Morgul Knights have lances, so potentially it's a little bit easier, but...
Well, we mentioned Piercing Strike orcs. You might as well Piercing Strike because they're wounding on courage and not defense.
Yeah, there's no reason why you wouldn't Piercing Strike, so yeah, you might as well.
But yeah, I knew immediately when I was playing against Return of the King that Aragorn is the thing you want to take care of.
Because he's just so good, and he has a 4+ kill stick. Like, I don't know why you. For me, there's a hierarchy to that list. You probably want to do it in the order that he said. Aragorn, then the King of the Dead, then try and kill the warriors.
Yeah.
Obviously, not having Harbinger, it still makes them hard to charge because they still cause terror, but it doesn't make it almost impossible on 2 dice. So, especially if you've got more models, you actually, average on 2 dice is 7, so you should make most charges.
And don't be afraid to shield off the army of the dead if you've not been able to charge and then they outnumber you in a fight. Just focus on surviving for that guy.
Yeah, just shield. Yeah, makes sense. If you've got a spear support, I guess it doesn't really make a difference, but...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Paintbrush Pirate, which is James Richardson, for those that don't know.
Hello, James.
Who just hit 1,000 subscribers. Congratulations, James. This is your episode 10 shout out because it's a running meme at this point. His current abandoned projects are all over the place. He keeps saying he's going to expand on his Rohan and Isengard armies, but never gets around to it, probably because of painting models for me. He's also got a Mordor / Barad-dûr and Rivendell armies that he needs to finish. And he's commented on the format for the league finale, which they discussed in the last episode, the sort of hobby ramble episode. But I think for the league finale, you could do Swiss rankings for the day, and then if you're left with a tie for any of the podium positions in the final league table, he's put fourth, but you encourage those people to play off against each other, i.e. first versus first would decide second, and second versus second would decide third.
Right. Okay. Well, it's kind of a conflict of interest for me to be commenting on what I think the format of the league finale should be.
You can give your opinion. I gave mine. My opinion was 4 games at 600 points is easily doable in a day. Anything higher than that will take a lot longer. In my opinion, regarding the scenarios for the league final, I think pairing the scenarios and making it random keeps it fair. That was my opinion on the event.
I mean, when I was asked about it by friends, friends in the league, I suggested that when you play the GBHL, and I went to the league finale last year, there's not a huge amount to play for in the sense of the players that are there are looking for the last tournament finish that will improve their league standing. But to be honest, you knew already that first place was going to be Jay, second place was going to be Ed. It was just, positions 3 through 11 that people were fighting over.
A bit of a formality almost.
Yeah, so you don't want it to be like that. But at the same time, what happens if you, in the first round, and it's randomly paired off, you get, say, the people that finished the league in second and third playing each other in the first round, and at the same time, you've got the people who finished 10th and 11th playing each other in the first round. So I suggested maybe you could do a seeding thing like they do with a lot of sports quarterfinals, where you like the first tier person on the league table plays 12th, and then you work it towards the middle, and then after that it's
Swiss.
Random, yeah.
Random. Okay.
Yeah, Swiss. Sorry, but then that makes it look like I'm defending my own interests.
Well, no, I actually agree with you, because if you've gone to enough league events, so obviously the way the league finale works is 1 through 12 enters one final tournament, 13 through 24 enters another final tournament. They're both going to run on the same day, but they're going to be run by different people. Jack will be there because he'll probably take part in one or the other, as a lot of people who have entered the league will. But he obviously can't run both events and play, so he will ask someone else to run one event, and he will run the one that he's not playing in, obviously. I also agree that if you've been, I say enough events, that doesn't really matter, as long as you've played enough games to qualify. If you've qualified well and you've achieved a position where you're 1 to 6, I agree, you should have some sort of seeding, whether it's first place 12th, second plays 11th, third plays 10th, fourth plays 9th, etc., etc. I have no issue with that. I think that's something that Jack could definitely look at. He hasn't decided on the format yet, I don't believe. But
has he decided on the points yet?
No, because he wants it to be 4 games. That's the issue. It's either 4 games of slightly higher points, but we finish later, which for some people like yourself who commute from a lot further away than I do, for me, I could play 4 1,200 point games and I'll still be home before a lot of people, because I live 10 minutes away from the hut, which is why I suggested 600 points, because you can do a 600 point game in an hour 45 very easily.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So Tom Hawker's comment is, good talk, guys. It's always a good paint motivator listening to this podcast. Maybe something to consider with your abandoned projects. Well, I mean, if I wasn't in 9 out of 10, I probably would listen to the pod more, but I've listened to the one that I wasn't in. Also, on the Bombadil Goldberry thing, they were at Ardicon this weekend representing a large alliance. I didn't, however, get a chance to speak to the opponents of the person playing them about what they thought about them, because I was too busy getting smashed up by my opponents. Fair enough.
Tom, by the way, shout out, with a Mumac, managed to get at least 4. The first 4 games, he got 4 of his oaths out of 4, which I thought was just amazing, because I struggled to get the 2 that I did. So that was my aim for this year. Regardless of the number of wins, I wanted to get some oaths, which are like bonus points. So, for example, one of them is, at the end of a game, have 2 terrain pieces which have got 5 or more of your models in base con. So when we did Heirlooms of Ages Past, and I deliberately started airdropping the relic counters into the forests, into the ruins. So
Yep.
just like when we get to the end game, I'm just going to have 5 guys there. And one of them was reduce your opponent to 25%. So we played to the death. That's a great one to try that one out for.
Yeah.
One of them is cautious commanders. Don't let any of your guys, any of your heroes use any fate or suffer any wounds, which with Lake Town is next to bloody impossible.
Yeah, that's a difficult one.
Yes, so there's some easier ones that I managed to tick off, but Tom managed to sweep those. He was really good at them.
Oh, nice.
There was a guy on our team which was called the Large Alliance because we started with the East Anglia Hobbit team, and there were only 3 of us. So we invited in Harry Parkhill from the Entmoot podcast. We had Tanya Treeborn, whatever her name is, from Lincolnshire, and we had a French guy called San who was playing quite a thematic the journey of Frodo and his friends to Rivendell. So he had Goldberry and Tom Bombadil. I think he also had Gildor and Glorfindel, I think. And so, yeah, he had a situation where one of the hobbits dug up the heirloom, and then he just put it in base contact with Tom Bombadil and said, right, you can't attack him now.
Oh, that's a little bit naughty, but yeah, fair.
Yeah, which is going back to that whole, is 25 mils an inch, but whatever, the TO didn't tell him off for it.
Fair. Smokes Awesome has commented, lovely little ramble chat. Just to echo what Josh said about 600 points, I think anything more than 650 becomes a struggle in one day. All that happens is you end up with multiple big heroes and or a massive hordes, neither of which add a great deal of tactical depth in his opinion, which is fair enough.
Right, okay.
Disagree, but fair enough. So that's the comments on the video. We did do a Facebook post. So Sam Huddy has cheers to CJ for being a great doubles partner, 31st out of 96 teams and 2 wins in 3 games. He then put, shame Dane struggled so much with A winning the first game. Obviously, we have no context to that, so perhaps you could...
I'm doing a vlog for the EAHC podcast. I'm going to try and edit that on Sunday. Nice. It's still relevant. But I did interviews with people who were on the team and some recordings of the games I played. So I'll be doing a proper little review of the tournament over the weekend.
Some extra content for people to look forward to. All right, we won't delve into that question anymore. Sam's followed that up with, and I'm being stupid. Congrats to Josh on his recent engagement. Thank you very much.
I'll say thanks to Sam as well, because we had a situation. He not only drove me and Tom all the way up to Manchester and back for Ardicon, but he had a situation where I've just realised this is you I'm about to talk about. He's going to the doubles tournament this weekend.
Oh, the one I can't go to now.
Yeah. And then you couldn't go, and he said to me, but I won't drop out. I'll still give you a place to stay overnight, and I'll take you so that you and Kieran can play. So it's a very selfless gesture.
He's a good lad.
And then by coincidence, Kieran can't make it now either. So now me and Huddersfield are going up to play together.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, my work put me in a situation where it was either this weekend or next weekend, and I didn't want to drop out of Strider Cup.
Yeah, so that's going to be good.
I had to pick one, and I picked that one. But Sam was very understanding, and obviously I just came back off holiday, and they were like, well, you've just had a holiday and work politics. Anyway, James Wilson has asked, despite the revised rules regarding magic, are there still spellcasters that are always worth taking? I believe we've discussed it, but yes.
By and large, yeah. Círdan and Shamans.
Shamans, and possibly, for me, the Mouth of Sauron, just because I love him. Because he's still good and he's cheap. So Tom Hawker has commented, I'd just like to give a shout out to Master Samwise. I don't often get to praise him for his good work, but he sorted out, a place for us to stay for the duration of Ardicon, and also gave me and CJ a lift up. So I think he deserves a pat on the back and a thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
They had a little interaction back and forth.
An old married couple, those two, honestly. But it's all good bands.
So Jason asked me a question regarding the podcasts going up on different platforms, so actual podcast sites, and I don't know how to do that, and it's something that Jack was supposed to be sorting out, but I think he's been busy. So
I will look at trying to get us onto SoundCloud, because I'm now, when I'm around, I'm doing the editing, so I'm going to try and put it where...
I normally download the file and convert it to MP3, and it's probably quite easy to do it from there, but I don't know. I've not looked into it myself. So
All right, fair enough.
James Richardson has, but then if you're happy to look into that, Siege, that would be great.
No problem.
James Richardson has asked, or said rather, congratulations to me. Thank you, mate. He's put, what do you guys make of the new spells, which we've already discussed? And he's put, and heroic resolve. I found resolve is useful to force my opponents to think twice about who they target, but often they just target a different area. The spell has done its job, but it can feel like a waste slightly. And then he's put, I've not really seen much of the new spells. Saruman's Fireball does look very good. I can't recall what other ones are new, but I'd be keen to see what you guys think. So I think we've covered the spell front anyway. So from that question, it would just be Heroic Resolve. I've only played against it once. And
what was the situation?
So it was against Dan with the Legendary Legion. Obviously, he had Aragorn. So it didn't cost him anything to do it every turn.
Yeah.
And it did mean that I couldn't really target Aragorn because it was just pointless.
Yeah, I'd say that if it didn't stop the hero in question moving, you'd see it a lot more often.
Right.
But sacrificing, because, for example, Heroic Resolve is on Bard, it's on Aragorn, it's on people that really you want to be fighting, if at all possible.
Yeah.
I've got Durberts in my Moria lists, and to be honest, it's, it gives you a little bit of protection. It gives you 1 dice to resist. If it gave you 2, maybe you'd look at it a bit more, but Durberts really needs the might for striking in that list above everything else. So I've never run into it. I've never used it. Having said that, maybe it just takes somebody using it correctly to show me. I'd never run into anybody that used Heroic Challenge until a couple of days ago, because now that's changed so that if you refuse, you can't use your Standfast at all, even if the other model dies.
Yeah, no, that's a really good change in my opinion. Which I think it's the right change. I think it makes sense, the change. I think it adds something to that specific, because I had never considered using it really before, because you spend a might point, unless it's with Shagrat, for instance, where you potentially get a might point back later on. There's no downside to them going, nah, I'm all right, thanks. So, okay, so that's all the questions from both, but there's a few questions on the episode previously that I don't think Jack and Dan saw last week. So I'm just going to quickly go over those. The team spirit, which I believe is Sam, has put able to reach strength 12. He's put Sauron with a maxed out heroic strength, and the troll chieftain going two-handed also needs maxed out heroic strength. And he put, did I win? Did he win?
No. Sauron is strength 8, so max heroic strength will go up to 11, and a troll chief does not have a hand and a half sword, as far as I'm aware. Even if it did, that doesn't increase its strength. So the answer to the question was, for those of you keeping score at home, Smaug is strength 9 and can do a heroic strength, so he could get up to strength 12. The other one is a little bit more obtuse, but it is a Wild Warg chieftain who is under channeled enraged beast and has done heroic strength. They are the 2 profiles that could theoretically get to strength 12.
There you go. I think I got Smaug, but I didn't get the chief.
So my question for this week is, which 6 heroes have access to or come with a banner?
I can think of 5 currently. Is it a banner or a banner effect?
No, an actual banner, because there's quite a lot of heroes that count as a banner but don't actually have one.
How about what would you like the league finale in November to be? Points, number of games, knockout, or we've discussed that. Question 38. What's the giveaway? I haven't decided yet, but we're still 30 subscribers away. So I've got 30 subscribers to think of something fitting for 100 subscribers. Question 39. What are your current painting projects? Currently, I am working on my very publicly now aware of Corsair Army. I was doing a hobby vlog series for it, but I need them for events soon, and I haven't got enough time, and I've got to finish painting about 20 models after this today because it's my only day off now. So we'll see. After that, I have decided to pick up the Goblin King throwing a goblin from this made to order. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time working on my Goblin Town.
Yeah, what did you think of the made to order and the news releases from Ardacon?
So I really love the King of the Dead. I think it's awesome. I think it's a really nice model. And going off the plastic Theoden that they released, which is also a very nice model, I'm actually really excited to get that model. I do have a Dead of Dunharrow army because everyone does now. But I'll kind of use it when it's not as massively popular as it is. Don't really like using what everyone's using because it doesn't feel like it's not as fun for me. But I have the banner, I have 6 riders, I have an amount of warriors, I have the old king model. So I'll definitely be picking up the king and the heralds. I think the heralds are also really nice. The made to order stuff, you had the metal orcs, I believe. You had the dwarf kings, the kings of men, the casualties, which is something I looked at getting the casualties, but it depends on the price. I'm not overly bothered about them if they're expensive. Money at the moment is a little bit. I have to sort of pick and choose hobby wise what I'm buying at the moment. So the Goblin King throwing a goblin is a model that I really wanted, and I missed out on it last time because it just went. I didn't realize it was going. Otherwise, I would have picked it up. And obviously, when I saw that it was available on Saturday, I don't know when this is going to be out, but if it'll be sometime this weekend. You have till the following Saturday to pick it up. So yeah, that's the model that Katie's actually going to get me. And also, obviously, we had is it Rohan at War?
Yeah.
Or War in Rohan, or whatever it's been titled, which I'm actually really looking forward to. I thought the Gondor at War book was really, really good. We've had Legendary Legions in the previous 2 supplements, so it'd be interesting to see the Legendary Legions that come out of that book, and potentially, what we added some new models to some existing factions in Gondor at War and the Scouring of the Shire. So it'll be interesting to see what gets added for the Isengard and the Rohan and anything else that may or may not be in the book. Obviously, I don't know, so it'd be interesting to see. What about you? What was your thoughts?
My thoughts. Yeah, the made to order stuff was largely leave it as opposed to take it. Maybe I get the casualties for conversion and terrain work, but otherwise, I might look at splitting a Dwarf King blister with somebody. At this point, the recording suddenly stopped working, so the sound quality has been slightly altered. Please enjoy the rest. What are they called now? They're not Erebor. Kingdom of Khazad-dûm or something like that.
Yep, Kingdom of Khazad-dûm.
Have one of them for that list, and then but otherwise I've got a really nice Goblin King. I don't really need the Kings of Men or Metal Orcs or Metal. I feel a little bit sorry because I sold 2 Metal Moria Goblins to use as captains, and because they were OOP, I was offered £8 for each of them, and now they're about to come out as a 4-pack for £10 or whatever it's going to be. So I feel a little bit sorry for the people I sold those to.
Right.
That wasn't deliberate. But
well, you don't know what they're going to put on made to order. It's not your fault. So
Yes, I think I probably won't pick up any of the made-to-order models, but
Right.
War in Rohan's quite interesting. I'm not sure what other models for Rohan could come out now, because Gondor of War gave us quite a few new ones already. But if you get a Legendary Legion for maybe the Defenders of Helm's Deep, the Ugluk and Grishnak raiding party, this will all be interesting. Somebody put up a collage of photos of characters, inverted commas,
I saw
from the
that.
GBHL.
Yeah.
The wild man that swears an oath to Saruman, the goblin-y looking orc that gets decapitated,
Yeah.
Haleth, son of Hammer, saying, "Oh, all these things that could become a profile," and then Rob Alderman underneath comments, "Some interesting theories here." So maybe there's a hint in those 4 words that we have
Maybe.
to dissect.
Maybe. Yeah, I think the Legendary Legions have all been very good in both books so far, so be interested to see what we get. It also depends on, I mean, Rohan, or is it War in Rohan?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could depend. They're not necessarily talking about current war in Rohan that we're all probably familiar with either. You don't know how far back they're going to go. We could see some really old stuff, but it's all speculation. I'm sure it'll be out before Christmas. So,
What if we get a profile for Helm Hammerhand?
I mean, that would be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Be really cool.
And some named dents. We get Quick Beam and all of the other ones.
Oh, I hadn't even considered the Ents. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Because I think it was either said at Articon or it was rumored that Horns were going to get a profile.
Oh, okay.
So that'd be good.
So regarding the questions, we've covered them now. Tom actually commented it on both videos, and Tom Hawker commented the Nature's Wrath one, which we already discussed. So that is all the questions. I don't know if Jack's back next week. And I don't know what my availability is regarding work, but I will try and sort something out with him, or he'll sort something out with someone else, or I'll sort something out with someone else. But we'll try and keep these somewhat consistent weekly if we can. Now, Katie always tells me off for not plugging this at the start, because if you've listened this far, thank you very much. But if you haven't and you've skipped off, you're not going to hear any of this anyway. But it is YouTube, and I'll do the YouTubey thing one more time, probably every episode one more time. But regardless, if you have listened to this far, leave a comment saying War in Rohan, and I'll know what you're referring to. And any questions for next week's episode, or the next episode rather, because it may not be next week, leave them down below. We also are going to do a Facebook post, because I think if we don't do one, we don't get as much interaction as we do with both, or we get more on one but we won't get any. Anyway, we're probably diluting the pool, but just leave comments and questions when I do either or. Like the video. Thank you to all the new people that have subscribed recently. We did jump up from like 55 to 70 in like a week, so that was pretty cool. We're 30 away from the giveaway. I don't know what it is yet. It'll be something. I think it'll be something quite cool, but I need to speak to a couple of people, see if I can work something out. Comment, like, share it. CJ's going to look at getting it on SoundCloud so that you can just listen to the pod. You don't necessarily have to watch a YouTube video. But we'll talk more about that within our podcast group. And a big thank you to CJ for coming on and helping us out again. It's his second time on the podcast, I believe.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
It's the second time. So thank you to CJ for stepping in and becoming our editor when he's not at Ardicon. Jack put the last one up because CJ was obviously at Ardicon and having a good time, and we just wanted to get something up to keep the consistency going. And that's it. Anything you want to add, mate?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, cool. So thank you very much for listening. Comment, like, share, subscribe, and we'll catch you all next time.
Bye-bye.